It's 5:20 on Early Breakfast. Now, protests against the US Supreme Court's leaked draft opinion to strike down the right to abortion continued across America yesterday as fears grew that other rights could be targeted by Conservatives. In an extraordinary security breach, first in the Supreme Court's history, or certainly verging on unprecedented, the leaked draft ruling by Justice Samuel Alito declared that Roe v. Wade was egregiously wrong from the start and must be overruled. Let's assess some of the reaction then to this with Andrew Donaldson, an American writer and commentator who serves as the managing editor for ordinary-times.com and is the host of Heard Tell, a daily radio programme covering culture and politics. Andrew, welcome to the programme.
Oh, welcome. Thrilled to be here. Appreciate you.
It's good to have you. And so I suppose it's difficult to think of a more divisive issue than the issue of abortion in the United States. And that seems to be playing out in the protest that we're seeing. And it's worth mentioning protests from really both extremes of the debate.
Yeah, because you have two things going on here. Once we have the legal side of this, which is, of course, what the brief is. It's where they're working on the case law, and this is 40-some years of precedent case law getting turned over. But what the real touch point here is, you have over 40 years of almost all the political and social and cultural efforts in America that has really become heavily dependent on abortion and focused on abortion and filtered through abortion because it's such a hot issue really coming to a head. That's the higher thing that has really elevated this and made it such a hot button issue. It's brought out the most engagement in people. It brings out the most fundraising people. It brings out the most politics in people. It is the issue that people believe the strongest on and are the least likely to compromise on. And you have 40 years of the culture and politics in America pointing to this moment. And now it's happened. And it's like a bomb going off in a lot of ways. A lot of people waiting for this for a long, long time, a lot of pent-up effort, and here it is.
It's interesting to consider, I suppose, the role of the Supreme Court at this point, because you can absolutely say that this is just what happens with the Supreme Court by its very nature, that rulings come and rulings go, and that's what happens with an institution like the Supreme Court.
It is, and this is why when we have Supreme Court nominees every so often, we had 3 of them under President Trump. This is why they've been so contentious, because everybody thought it was building to a moment like this, especially as the court trended more and more conservative over those last 3 picks, and it tipped. The Supreme Court, of course, it's supposed to be a co-equal branch of government, and the way our system is set up, it has oversight over the other 2 branches. We have some dysfunction in the legislative system, which plays into why abortion's in the court in the first place. We have some overreach in the executive system. All those sorts of things lap up onto the shores of the Supreme Court. They're left to clean a lot of this mess up judicially, and here you go, especially something like Roe v. Wade, where, we heard the rhetoric this week from our political leaders where they're like, well, we want to codify this in the law. Well, that's not going to happen. And if it happened in the first place, it wouldn't have been in the Supreme Court in this method in the first place. So it is part of our system of government. It's kind of gotten to be an ugly part because of all those cultural and political factors we talked about. But the Supreme Court is very much, this is the biggest Supreme Court ruling in at least the last 40, 50 years, probably since civil rights, as far as wide-ranging effects.
In terms then of, I suppose, the political conversation at this point, is there an extent to which there is simply a kind of driving down a cul-de-sac, a dead end here? Because if the Supreme Court rules, that's it, and there can be political pushback and debate and consternation and conversation. But actually, if this is the ruling of the Supreme Court, there's very little that can be done, apart from, I suppose, when it comes to voting in an election and an electoral context, because that is perhaps, in the maybe medium to longer term, the only way to push back against the Supreme Court. And by that I'm guessing at you fill it with different judges next time.
Right, and the Supreme Court, of course, is always changing. Nobody thought President Trump was going to get 3 picks and flip the court that quick. Who knows what happens over the next 5-10 years? Let's not kid ourselves. This is just the beginning of the middle of the beginning again, because as soon as this takes effect, if this ends up being the ruling, it was supposed to come out sometime in June. We assume it will again. The lawsuits against this, we have 26 states that already have laws on the books that automatically trigger. About 13 of those automatic. The rest of them will have to be legislated. Those lawsuits for when all that happens, these lawsuits for when this goes down in June, those are all written. Those are all going to get filed. We're going to, in a very real sense, start this process all over again. Now, until the court changes, the outcome probably isn't going to change. But this has been a judicial fight for over 40 years. I suspect it'll be a judicial fight for the next 40 years as well.
Yeah. You mentioned the level of engagement, the fundraising, the opinion that emerges on this issue. Of course, we can look ahead to the midterms at this point, towards the end of this year. And it is safe to say that this will be at the centre of the midterm campaigns, is it not?
Yeah, and it's interesting because there really wasn't a whole lot of abortion debate outside of the parties because the parties look like the reason they fundraise on this is because that is one of the most deeply held beliefs on both sides. That means that's one of the most engaged things. That's one of the things, and the most engagement you get, the more fundraising you get. There was actually some reporting and polling that came out that there was actually one candidate in the whole country that was running an explicit abortion ad in the midterms until this happened. Now, how much is that going to change? Probably a lot, not only because of all that noise we talked about, but because, like you said, it's a midterm election year. We just started voting. Over the next 2-3 months. We'll have our primaries and then the general election in November. This is a heavy, heavy issue for the most hardcore politicos. This touches a lot of boxes. This crosses a lot of streams. So in an already contentious election year like this midterm is going to be, of course, folks are going to go to that. The political parties love it because there was already a ton of fundraising just on Tuesday after the announcement of this, both for things like Planned Parenthood and abortion causes, but also for the Democratic Party and for the Republican Party, who is going to try to claim this as somewhat of a victory. This is going to drive a lot of engagement. How that affects the ballot box, we're going to have to wait and see.
Andrew, really good to speak to you. Thank you for putting the debate into context for us. Appreciate that.
Anytime.
Thanks. Andrew Donaldson, an American writer and commentator who serves as the managing editor for ordinary-times.com and is the host of Heard Tell, a daily radio programme covering culture and politics, highlighting, well, his words, a bomb going off in terms of the debate on abortion, which has been reignited by this draft ruling from the Supreme Court, and also explaining, and it's important to remember that this is the nature of the Supreme Court. This is what happens. Decisions come and decisions go, depending on how the Supreme Court rules.